Many Constant Worlds is a meta-disjointed journey through the Dark Tower series by Stephen King.
I'm Taryn, they, them, and I need no script. Because I don't have one out.
You were provided one. To be clear, they were provided one.
No, I was provided one, but then I forgot to open it right now, and so that's why I'm kind of a little confused. I don't have my fucking bones for this. So
I'm Kat, she, her, and the next episode will be my birthday release.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
I'm expecting something from everyone, at least good energy-wise.
A trip to Maine.
I don't want a trip to Maine.
What the
That's
fuck
for
is
Taryn's
wrong with
birthday.
you? I don't want to wait that long. And also, what is wrong with you? Why not?
There's just a lot of places I want to go first. You know what? You can give me a trip to Colorado. I'd rather go there.
Ew. Like, I understand why, but also, no, we are so much closer to Colorado. Like, we could probably just drive.
You know what? Actually, this comes down to one thing. I don't like going places. Give me subscriptions to Max.
Oh, yeah. Not even, like, pay for months of the current subscription. You heard it here, folks. She wants many more subscriptions.
Yes.
Oh, do you have, like, an invite code? Can you, like, do they do a thing where, like, you can get off if you, like...
No, I don't think so. I think they're pretty solidly like, no, people just want our service, so...
That's fair. That's very stupid. Eventually, they're either going to sponsor us or send a cease and desist.
That's fine. That's fine. They can do what they see necessary.
Well, in response to your not liking going places, for not my 19th birthday, I think it was Christmas the year I turned 19, my parents gave me a suitcase. And I'd already moved out, but I mean, the day after my 18th birthday, my shit was pretty much on the lawn, so it wasn't so much a get the fuck out. I mean, it could have been like an extra strong get the fuck out.
Get out of town!
But also, because I was just, as much as possible, going places. So, and I think I had like a duffel that I'd probably got for like $10 at Target at the time. You can't get anything for $10 at Target anymore, except for maybe in like the little dollar spot.
That dollar spot's pretty awesome, though.
That dollar spot is bopping.
Like, I like that dollar spot.
Would you also accept Target gift cards for your birthday?
Absolutely.
It needs to have more than $10 on it, though. So maybe a lot of you pool together to get, because otherwise, well, but the dollar spot is bopping, so that's fine. I will also say anything book related and also books.
No, really? The book podcast?
Yeah, but I don't want that from my, like, I like books, but I'd rather get them from the library.
No, it's fair. Support your local libraries.
Which is why I say I'd rather get them from the library in Maine.
Anyways, so as we heard just before this podcast, we read the books so you don't have to. We fully support trigger warnings and taking care of your own mental health, our mental health. Everybody needs to just take care of themselves. And this book is very triggering. So here are the trigger warnings for it and thus this episode. Child death, racial slurs, racism, death, bullying, child abuse, sexual content, murder, violence, domestic abuse, homophobia, gore, suicide, fat phobia, animal cruelty, anti-Semitism, misogyny, pedophilia, sexual assaults. And that's just the things I could list, because I could probably fill an hour of content warning.
And many more. You didn't say fat phobia nearly enough times for the section that we read.
This section is particularly fat phobic, so if that is something you've been like, oh, I got through last time and I was fine, just be aware that we have a chapter about Ben, and he was a big kid, and Stephen King does not like to let that detail go.
I don't know. Stephen King was pretty, like, he didn't seem like he wanted to harp at all on the fact that Ben was insecure about that, or whether or not he was a big kid, or what the ramifications of being a bigger kid was, or how much you eat to be a bigger kid, which we now know is probably not true, or I promise I also am not going to harp on this the whole episode. I'm lying. Or oh my God.
Let's get into it then. So we read
It big eye or little eye?
both. I/I.
Schrodinger's eye? Schrodinger's capital? I can't. Oh my God.
We read part 2, chapters 4 through 7. Part 2 is mostly set in June 1958. There is some framework that starts out in the 80s to set up the flashbacks for chapters 4, 5, and 7. Meanwhile, chapter 6 starts out with news clippings.
Was I the only one who felt like the news clip, and maybe it's because I was using the audiobook, but the news clipping parts kind of made me think of the beginning of Santa Claus is Coming to Town, when it's like, biggest storm to hit, it's like a massive blizzard, will Santa make it? And it's like, did people put that in the news in like the 40s and 50s? Like, well, maybe that one's from the 70s.
What, that show?
Yeah, Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Yeah, I think that one's the 70s.
I think so.
With the weird Jessica doll, because Mrs. Claus is named Jessica. Yeah, no, but yeah, like, I mean, I don't know if Santa's gonna make it.
Dune had come out by that point. Jessica was a bopping name.
I can't mentally, and also, how dare you put me back in the mindset of Dune? I feel like you just don't want me to go off on Lord of the Rings this episode. God damn it. Now I'll just do it about them both.
Tolkien really did, like, not use the name Jessica nearly enough.
I'm just picturing, like, an elf named Jessica now. Like, maybe that's Legolas's girlfriend. Like, we have Arwen and Galadriel and Jessica. Jessica has big hoop earrings because I've never met a Jessica that didn't. Like,
kick your ass.
I've never met a Jessica that couldn't. Like,
so Ben is on a plane, totally blitzed. The flight attendant thinks he's dead. He's not. He talks to her about his memories while the poor flight attendant has someone demanding her attention because customer service literally never fucking changes. I get, you know, sometimes we all need someone to talk to. You know what? Maybe reach out to proper channels, because the person on the hourly wage that's probably underpaid.
The only thing I will give Ben here is that he's smashed. So he has no idea what's happening.
That's true.
But when we first meet Ben, he's like customer service's answer to Jesus. And now he is
the guy you really don't want to have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, what is a male Karen? What do they call that?
I actually think it probably would have been better for the flight attendant if he had been dead. So that he's not going to sit here and be like, we were building a dam. Okay, sir. Got it. Great. There's a guy over there. I gotta go.
While I've never been a flight attendant, I have worked a lot of retail and customer service, and I can confirm you never want to be caught in one of those fucking conversations where it's like, I have so many other things going on right now, and none of them include talking to you about your weird childhood memories and your dam. Mostly because you are so smashed, I thought you were dead, which means you're probably about to try to fucking grope me.
Yeah.
That's what this is leading to, especially since this is 1980 something.
Yeah.
And that just means you're going to get away with it. I'm supposed to laugh about it and it's going to be fine. I mean, it's a flight attendant. How much trouble do people get in even now?
One interesting thing I found was that we get a third Ralph in this book alone. I'm thinking Ralph's the pilot from the way that the flight attendant is talking about it. So we have Ralph, Beverly's father-in-law. We have Ralph, Bill's, like, friend. And now we have Ralph the pilot.
Do you think they're all the same Ralph?
That's what I'm wondering. One man in black Ralph.
It really hadn't occurred to me, but, like, there's no reason that her father-in-law couldn't, like... Oh, no, didn't her father-in-law die?
I don't know. I don't remember.
But the second Ralph could be the same guy.
Could be.
Like, he just got out of Derry and became a pilot.
Well, I mean, that the Ralphs are not from Derry.
Oh.
The Ralphs are just, like, spread around the world.
That's fair. I mean, I do think it used to be a more common name, and then it became a euphemism for throwing up, and nobody's naming their kid Ralph anymore. At best, you're going to get a Rolf, but, like, The Sound of Music also kind of ruined that name.
Doesn't matter. Ralph is just a name that's already on my list of names that's used a lot. So, 3 of them in a single book.
3 of them so far.
Yeah. Ben flashes back to the last day of 5th grade, and in this section, I heard the fucking words 5th grade so much. I can only think of This American Dad episode where, like, Stan and Francine get real into watching Bewitched, and Stan decides he wants to be greeted with a martini when he gets home from work. But he's a lightweight, and Francine tells him, a martini is a lot of alcohol. Are you really sure you want that? And, first day, he ends up getting a drunk off his ass. And he's, like, sitting next to Francine, and he's, like, he's smashed, and he's saying that he was in the best shape of his life, he was closer to God than ever, and flush with cash. To which Francine replies, I don't want to talk about the 5th grade anymore. So every time this book mentions the 5th fucking grade, all I hear in my head is Francine going, I don't want to talk about the 5th grade anymore.
Ooh.
Yeah, but that we're not going to get away with that. We have to talk about the 5th grade.
There's a lot of, like, and I'm going to be clear right now. I'm putting it out there. I'm saying it right now. I'm like enjoying this book. Okay. It's fine. This book has been fine. It's not The Mist.
Oh God.
But it's also not The Dark Tower. So it's somewhere in the middle. There's a lot of space in the middle of those 2 things. But there's a lot of things in this book that I'm like, I don't want to talk about blank anymore. and I think, and we'll talk about why later.
We will.
We're going to talk about why at length in probably all of these episodes because I have no self-control. But if you're this deep, you know that.
Yeah, you don't make it to episode 14 just by a fluke.
You make it to episode 14 because I have personally called you and said, listen to my podcast.
I always, back to another animated show, because this is, I watch a lot of animated, shows, regardless. So there's an episode of King of the Hill where Dale starts a radio station. And just everybody in the neighborhood just listens to it casually. He's on 24/7. He ends up having to sell the radio station to Octavio because he can't be on constantly. And that's kind of what I see is just everyone in the neighborhood casually listening to us because they're trying to be supportive.
I'm not sorry.
We appreciate your support. Ben does not let Henry Bowers cheat, and he's got to bounce out of the school before Henry does.
Which is a choice.
It's a
Both
choice.
of those things are a choice.
He goes to the library, he writes a haiku for Bev.
Which is a choice.
Gets jumped on his way home by Bowers and his friends. He ends up, falling over the side of, a bridge and goes running to try and get the fuck away from this kid. Thinks he killed him at one point. Does manage to, get away eventually and kind of hide. He takes a little nap.
Which is a choice.
Hey, you know what? He literally just had a fight or flight situation.
No, for sure, but he's not out of it either. So it's just a weird...
He thinks he is because he does hear Bowers and his friends start talking to other kids. So he's like, oh no, now it's their problem.
No, for real, but you get home. You gotta get home
He's only just finished the 5th grade. He is a child, damn it.
He knows that his mom is going to lose her shit about his clothes. So he should still be in some level of fight or flight. You gotta get home and deal with the issue of your clothes, and then the adrenaline comes down. That's all I'm saying.
Well, Ben's adrenaline came down early.
But I do appreciate that representation, because that's true. That's a lot of how that works, is like when you crash. And you pass, well, I'm not gonna say everybody, but I can say from personal experience, when I crash, I legitimately crash. And there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
I just, and I'm done. And I'm going to sleep no matter where I am or what is happening or if I'm baking cookies or not.
While Ben is asleep, he dreams of what he has continued to refer to vaguely throughout the chapter of what happened in January. We finally get to learn what the fuck happened in January. And what that was is he was like walking and he saw down in like the area that he's in, which is it's the Barrens. He's like running around in this area that's got like a river, but and shit like that. Look, it doesn't matter. Does not matter. He sees a clown down there, and the clown has a bunch of balloons that are able to like flow against the wind, which is the thing that he's like the most entranced by with this clown, is how the balloons are coming at him now and the wind is blowing the other way. He ends up falling into a bit of a trance over these balloons because, you know, he's hearing this voice say, "Don't you want one?" And he does. He does want a balloon. It is only broken when there's like a whistle or something from the town hall, and it wakes him up enough that he's able to realize that the clown is like a mummy. And he was talking about, like, initially he was thinking of like the old school movies, you know, The Mummy, not the cool Brendan Fraser one, but love that movie. I love Brendan Fraser.
Yeah. Well,
and Rachel Weisz.
No, we all love Brendan Fraser, and Rachel Weisz is pretty great too. I'm just...
But he kind of corrects himself, and he's just like, it doesn't look like that, like, movie mummy as Kate looks like, or what a real mummy would look like. Either way, so he ends up waking up from this dream where he narrowly escaped a clown with balloons that was a mummy, and he finds Bill and Eddie, and Bill is kind of panicking, and Eddie has had an asthma attack. And that leads us into Bill's chapter. Would you like to pause here so you can rage?
Yeah, I was holding back. I've been holding back. I was so good. I have issues with Ben's chapter, and my issues can be summed up in 3 words. Editing.
I thought you were going to say, "Fuck you, Stephen King." It's still not 3 words, but it still felt like what you were going to do.
Could have.
Or you would fuck you, Stephen.
My hypothesis is that this book has like a legitimate lack of editing gone like through it. I have not researched. I have not found out. I've been kind of trying to get through it for now, and I promise you, my dear sweet listeners, that I will do my due diligence and I will research and
make a note of that so you don't forget.
Okay, fine. Research, editing, and publishing. I will be honest, I don't know how I'm gonna find that out, but I'm gonna see what I can do to find out more about that, because there's at least 2 passages that I know of in Ben's chapter, and wouldn't you know it, I left my book upstairs again, because I mean, I don't even have the script down in front of me. It's almost like I'm a very forgetful human being who does very forgetful things. They were both passages about the largeness of Ben. that were almost identical. This is something that Stephen King does, and it's a stylistic thing, I think, for him, in more than one book, where he kind of repeats things almost as a motif. And he does this often, but in this case, it really didn't seem that way. So either it needed to be tweaked so it made more sense, or it needed to be edited because we only needed one of them. They were almost identical. God, that would just be better if I had the fucking passages. Throughout, we are just hammered over the head with Ben and how big he is and how much he eats, and it's almost sloppy. It's almost more like King is trying to hit a word count in this chapter. And I can say moving into the next couple chapters, it feels cleaned up. Bill's chapter,
Bill is just an asshole.
Bill is just an asshole. And
Eddie for life.
Oh, I'm more of a Richie stan, but we haven't made it far enough into the book.
It just means the house can support Reddy just fine.
Yes, no, for sure. For sure, this is a Reddy house. I will say, we did make it into some Richie, and I am still a Richie stan, so further in, Bill's assholery still continues to make sense, and even the references to Ben's size are cleaned up and make more sense, and aren't as, this chapter with Ben almost feels like it was inserted at the last minute.
I have a question then. It only just occurred to me.
Yeah.
So, Ben, when we got his chapter in chapter 3, when we got his little section, he was seen through the eyes of the bartender. The start of his chapter here, he's seen through the eyes of the flight attendant. We only get into Ben's brain when he becomes a child. Do you think Stephen King just could not write in Ben's brain, and that's why he tried to avoid it as much as he could, but then he can't write this part with Ben without having to go because of the stylistic choices he made?
I think that's actually a really good point. I think that's really possible. I do think he struggled a lot with Ben. I would be really surprised to find out that Stephen King himself has ever been a bigger person.
Yeah.
He did an okay job of writing some of the, self, I don't want to say hatred, but just
loathing.
the loathing and the, just the insecurities that you get. And I think that comes from being somebody who has some sense of self-loathing and insecurity. Some of it, though, he didn't quite, I think, capture, which I say is somebody who was a big kid and a bigger I have had that experience. It's not quite there. He definitely tried. I think you are right. I think that he struggled a lot. He can see Ben from the outside, but it is not a person that he sees from the eyes of.
Yeah.
Bill is someone he sees from the eyes of. I think there are other characters that we get into that he sees from the eyes of, but Bill particularly, he sees from inside of. That being said, there is a lot, I think, that could have been edited.
Oh, I agree. I don't disagree with that at all.
It's almost like they wanted it to be this long so that way it kind of matched other chapters, but to me, it doesn't have to. We could have had a short Ben chapter, and some of that we didn't need it to kind of match in length with these other pieces, and the book doesn't have to be 1,100 pages long.
I gotta say, Ben's chapter felt excruciatingly long.
Yes.
Especially, compared to the follow-up chapters that are right after it. You mentioning, it didn't need to be like this. It could have been shorter. Just, it didn't need to match. It makes me almost wonder if he decided to use the throwaway character that he does not connect with to create a structure so that he could write the other chapters better. And that's not, that, my point is it does need the editing. That chapter felt so fucking long. I didn't, actually measure it, lengthwise. I might do that, but it was such a long fucking chapter in comparison to the others that felt really short.
And I think more than anything, it's because he wants to show these bullies, and he wants to show how hard the bullies are going, and he wants to show it quickly and deeply. And then we're also getting introduced to Beverly through Ben, to a different side of Beverly through Ben, because we've only seen adult Beverly through the eyes of somebody who's really awful. Nobody else has talked about Bev. She's a non-entity at this point.
So I just did the quick look and math. Ben's chapter was 56 pages in the copy of the book that we have. The remaining chapters, I didn't actually check their length, but there are 3 of them left. They total 102 pages together. Ben's chapter is excruciatingly long.
And it's that long when it could have...
Yeah.
Like, it...
No,
there's just no reason.
I support your campaign.
And I really feel, especially knowing how long he worked on writing this book, I wonder if it was late.
Yeah.
If it was late getting into the publisher, if it was late getting into the editor, and I wonder if essentially they were like, we want to get this book out. Especially knowing how many, like, novellas and shorter novels and compilate, like, The Gunslinger, I think, came out as a book during this time.
It did, yes.
And that's a bunch of short stories that had already been out that they compiled as a book. So he had other books that came out during this time, but I don't know that he had any 1,100-page ones. Was The Stand?
The Stand should have already been released. I don't know that it was in the time that he was writing this. Let me actually pull up my list.
Sure.
The Stand came out in 1978, so 2 years before he supposedly started working on this one.
So yeah, we have The Stand, which is his last really big book, which came out before he even started working on this one. And then this one takes as long as... And obviously it's going to take a long time. It's a big book. But I do just wonder if they were so anxious to get it out.
And the drawing of the 3 came out the next year. And actually later, a limited edition of it came out just months after it came out.
Of the drawing of the 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's got smaller books. He's got novels coming out while this is in, like, he's working on so many things at the same time, but they want another The Stand.
Yeah.
They want another big book. They want another, especially something else that can get put on TV or on the big screen, or that can be a big thing, because the drawing of the 3, like, I don't know how it was received immediately, like, as far as literature, but we know it's never been a movie.
Yeah.
Obviously, he had movies coming out through the 80s. It's just not...
I mean, there are a couple of really, really thick Stephen King novels, to the point that we know that they're thick. They're over 1,000 pages.
Yeah.
And the first ones that come to mind for me are The Stand. I think Under the Dome's like 2,000 pages, and that's much later down the line.
Under the Dome is...
And then I think It's Insomnia is also thick as shit. So I think you might be right in that they wanted another The Stand.
Yeah. And they, even if, so say it's not that it's late or anything, but it's also Stephen King. He's so massively successful. Why are they looking too closely? Like, people are going to buy it no matter what.
Yeah. They're not going to make a podcast about it where they tear it apart and analyze every fucking guy named Ralph.
Right? And I do want to be clear, like, I am sure that these are criticisms that have already been made.
Yeah.
But I'm not, like, we wouldn't have a podcast if we went and looked at everything that everybody else has already said.
No, well, and we're not stans. I think we both prefer to approach things from as honest of a perspective as we can.
What is it in anime when the character has a crush on somebody, so they're really mean to them and won't admit that they have a crush on them? Isn't that a thing?
I don't know.
I just keep thinking of an airplane because they have a character in an Undertale that's that but an airplane.
Uh-huh.
It's tsundere plane. So I think it's like a tsundere or something.
Okay.
Because it's a tsundere plane. And so I can only picture it as an airplane. I think, if I'm right, it's because that's how we are when we stan things. If you stan a thing, you must be mean. And you must pick it apart.
It's not even you must be mean, but like
Then you and I are different.
I feel like you can't glorify things because legitimately, like, Paul Sheldon was an asshole in Misery. He's a terrible fucking person. That does not mean he deserves to be tortured, but he was an awful person, and he is a stand-in for King. And, you know, I recently learned about an article from 2014 where apparently Annie is cocaine. I don't know. I still prefer my
cocaine?
my fairy tale story that he's just mad about the eyes of the dragon and was telling everybody to fuck off. But regardless, The Mist was a terrible book. Like, these things are true. Things are problematic sometimes, and some things suck.
I want the version of that story where it's just me tying King up because I found him and going, I really liked Eyes of the Dragon and I would like a sequel, but I want you to put my OC in it. And this is how I want it to go, please. I mean, I'm not going to hobble you or anything, but like, please, would you do this? And then if he says no, I'll be like, okay, then I'll just kind of let him go.
Would you give him a laptop with an N key?
Most of my laptops are pretty broken. I do think they all have N keys, but most of them don't work.
Okay.
If I had access to a laptop that worked and had an N key, like, yeah, because, like, what, I want the story to have N's in it.
Fair.
I wouldn't give him one possessed by Ducky Daddles.
I mean, Ducky Daddle's the real MVP of that story.
My new theory is that that's Elaine, by the way, from the Dark Tower. But my brain, like, clicked with that the other night. It's a whole thing. Because, shockingly, we don't just talk about this on the podcast. We talk about it other times as well. Which is, oh, God.
There's a lot of Stephen King in Taken in this house. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to Bill's chapter, if you're good.
Hi-ho silver away.
Heck yeah. So Bill is also on a plane heading for Derry. He starts out by remembering his bike, Silver.
Excuse me. He starts out by bitching about the fat guy next to him because we have to be reminded how evil fat is and fat people are, and that fat man is taking up all the space next to Bill.
But eventually he starts remembering his bike, Silver, which leads into the flashback where Bill is worried about Eddie.
Because Bill was a skinny boy and he could ride a bike, and Ben couldn't have done that because he was a little roly-poly fatty boy. I don't have issues.
So Bill is worried about Eddie. They had been building a dam when Henry and his friends showed up, destroyed the dam, and left on their hunt for Ben.
Why are they doing this, by the way? Why are they just building a dam? They're like, fuck you, natural ecosystem, and anybody in the town who relies on this water source and anything else. Dam. I'm gonna make a dam.
Children do weird shit. I remember being in school and there was like a fucking manhole and we were convinced that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were down there, so we were trying to get the manhole like dug up enough that we could get it out.
You just described having a motivation for it, though. Even if that motivation is kind of dumb. Because obviously that's not where the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles lived. I'm pretty sure they're in New York.
Yeah, no. They are.
And
They're
you
very
weren't in New York.
No, I was in Orville.
Why would they be in Orville? You have like the Teenage Mutant Meth Turtles. Like, but
yeah.
But at least you had a motivation. Their motivation is just...
They're in the best shape of their life. They're closer to God than ever. And they are flush with cash.
I don't want to talk about the 5th grade anymore. All it makes me think of is that John Mulaney joke. Where he's talking about, like, being young and, like, blowing up eggs in a parking lot. Because he's just going through puberty and they have so many hormones and he doesn't know what to do with them. And he's like, but nobody asked me, like, why? I'm repeating this joke very badly. And he's like, so, eggs. Some shit like that. And that's all I can think of the whole time when they're just like, we're gonna build a dam. It's like, you guys need to, like, do what other kids, like, go jack off in a corner and then beat each other up and be fucking normal. And not do this weird fucking build a dam shit. What is this? This is weird. And I say that as somebody who was a weird kid and would have done this, exactly this bullshit, for no reason. And it's because you're weird and you don't know what you're doing. Find a comic book. Do that.
It's the 50s. They have limited options.
They could have read Batman. Batman was out. Batman was out and had homoerotic tendencies. And for at least 2 of them, that would have been really helpful.
So Bill leaves, and he leaves Ben with Eddie, and he goes to get Eddie a fresh inhaler because his was empty, because drama. He takes Silver, and he rides like a bat out of hell to the pharmacy, gets the goods, returns, and gets Eddie loaded up with what the pharmacist says is essentially tap water.
And I cannot even. First, camphor. What the fuck do you people think? I don't want to start out. You know what? You people are good people who are listening. I don't want to start out. Like, I'm not actually mad at you. I'm displacing my anger. But what do you think is in Vicks VapoRub? I love Vicks VapoRub. It makes me feel so, like, when I'm sick, which I am a lot. When I'm sick, I like it. I like Vicks VapoRub. Read the back of it sometime. I don't know if camphor is in it, but it's shit like that. Now, admittedly, like, I have an actual inhaler approved by the FDA that has albuterol in it, which works for actual, but you know what else I have is an inhaler from the dollar store that I can shove up my nose that is like just menthol and Himalayan pink salt.
It's amazing.
Yeah, which is essentially what Eddie is using. While no, that's not gonna like fix it if he's having a deadly asthma attack. We know now that asthma, like especially if it's mild asthma, you can sometimes like be fine if you calm down and let it pass. Also, panic, not great for asthma, and also panic attacks helped by aromatherapy. Like something like camphor and sitting and letting it pass. And so while King is trying to write a hypochondriac, what he's written is somebody who's having panic attacks being helped by aromatherapy, and possibly somebody with mild asthma who's being helped by things that would help mild asthma. I don't know if that was actually his goal. I don't know what his goal was, but I think to a person reading who doesn't have certain backgrounds, they're going to read it and assume that Eddie is a hypochondriac.
The boys bond. They make their plans to build a better dam the next day. They go home. Bill goes into George's room. And apparently George had a photo album because he had a growing interest in photography, it would appear.
George, who was 6?
Yeah, he asked people for photos. Stuff like that.
Oh, he asked them, like, 4 photos that they already had? Because my understanding, the way that it had seemed to me was that he asked them, like, to take them. And I was like, oh, the 6-year-old took photos. Okay, Stephen King.
No, he would ask people for photos, and because he got to a point where he was just asking them for any photos.
Okay.
And, like, you could basically hand them to him.
That was my fault. That was my misunderstanding.
Bill had an incident previously that he's kind of vaguely mentioned because, you know, we're just waiting. That's the structure of these, is that each kid had an occurrence with it, and it happened at some point, and they're going to keep saying the thing that happened in blank or blank time ago, and then eventually we're going to get to hear them tell us what the fuck happened. So the incident that Bill had repeats itself, where George's picture turns sinister and then bleeds. Bill freaks out and leaves George's room. That is Bill's chapter, which you can see why it's much shorter. But I have a question. And especially because you just mentioned Ducky Daddles. Is Silver a gunslinger?
Silver the bike?
Silver the bike. I've got it down with my list of gunslingers in the wild, along with Ducky Daddles and Mrs. Repler. Bill describes Silver as saving them on multiple occasions. And in this, where he's riding to go get that inhaler, he mentions that it saved Eddie's life. It's this bike that is bigger than the other bikes. And it's a used item, like Ducky Daddles was, but with like some TLC from Bill at Eddie's mechanical direction, because now it makes sense why he owns a limo service.
Yeah.
They're able to like get it like all fixed up.
I think that's hard to say because it doesn't talk, like it's not the way that Ducky Daddles was, where it talked, at least in Paul's head, it seemed like Paul gave it dialogue. And so far, Silver doesn't seem to have that back and forth with Bill. So far, it seemed more like the way that kids will kind of, because Bill is not getting at home any kind of care. Yeah. Which I think we see in this chapter.
Yes, we do.
We're seeing that he's being neglected.
Massively. His parents are shit.
It almost seems more like he's starting to put that on other things, and he's put some of that onto this bike. He's just putting it other places. I would say keep eyes on the bike, because I'm not sure. Yeah. It's a lot harder to say without having that.
No, that's fair. So I know that you told me, I'm not going to pretend like I don't know things of the future, but I know you've talked about Oi, and we have an entire bit at the beginning of The Gunslinger where they're talking about animals who can talk. And if things do not always translate, is it possible it's something like that where it's an animal type? Because Ducky Daddles, as it also turns out, was a legitimate cartoon duck that Paul had assigned that to that character. And Silver's obviously named after the Lone Ranger's horse.
Yeah. So I was wondering that a little bit while I was thinking about it now, and I'm not sure. Okay. I think once you meet Oi, you'll kind of see Oi is very like imagine Oi is almost like a tanuki. I think that's a good way to think of him, where he's almost person-like. What I am wondering, and I think it came up in The Gunslinger already, where they talk about how his guns were made with the metal that was melted down from the sword of Arthur Eld. Yeah. Right? The bike is called Silver, and it's like way too big for him, and it's talked about how sturdy it is, and it's like...
Not like the other bikes.
Not like the other bikes. It's described a lot like Roland's guns.
Okay.
Over and over again, because his guns are huge, and they're really sturdy, and they've got the sandalwood grips, but they're made, I think they're usually described as made of iron. They're just the way that they're described. I think that description is really similar to the bike. And obviously you're not going to give kids guns generally. I don't know.
Ben has a gun, I believe. I think they mentioned that.
It is the 1950s, so I'm not shocked. The way that they talk about the bike in terms, they say it saved our lives. Roland's guns are really referred to very similarly. Mm-hmm. So I could see it being some kind of like gunslinger analog. I could see it possibly being something like Oi. But Oi is a full member of the quartet. He's not like it's not like Roland's horse or something. Yeah. He's a full-fledged, like if he was a human, or like Rocket from Guardians of the Galaxy. Like he can't speak full sentences or anything, but he's considered, at least by the fandom, and I would say by the books, like he's a member.
No, I figured. I didn't mean that like by talking about the horse. I just meant because that was more an assignment from a TV show, because Ducky Daddles is a cartoon. Yeah. The Lone Ranger is a show. No. Like it's a media reference.
For sure. I wanted to make it more clear if I hadn't been clear. Oh, okay. With Oi, like how he is in the group. But the way that they talk about the bike as being this tool that almost has a life of its own, that very much, like, it's Excalibur-like.
Yeah.
Bill is very much referred to as kind of the leader of this little group.
Like, he's fucking awful. I get the kid.
So was King Arthur.
The kid has a really shit, like, situation at home, which is gone through in this chapter. And I told you this. This is what happens when you're sired by a Zach. I'm sorry if you are a Zach or you were sired by a Zach. But legitimately, what the fuck?
I mean, at least sired by a Zach in the 1950s. Like, yes. But, like, especially
I didn't think Zach's got old enough to, like, be dads.
I was going to say, sired by a Zach in a Stephen King book, because that's a new name.
Yeah.
Like, he's not a Paul.
Yeah.
Like, where the fuck did that come from?
He's a Zach that sired a Bill and a George.
Yeah, where did this come from? But I think, like, especially look at the group, like, Stephen King keeps trying to write these, like, Arthurian analogs.
Yeah.
And we have literally, like, a little round table of these kids.
Yeah.
You know, I would even, like, Bev is Gwendolyn, or Guinevere, not Gwendolyn. Jesus Christ. You know, because she's Bill's girl, and then she moves on to Ben, and it's a whole, yeah, I mean, it's a little Arthurian analog. And so I would say silver is much more meant to be the Excalibur.
Okay.
So the same way that Roland's guns are literally forged from Excalibur.
You know what? Let's talk about Bill's parents for a minute.
Oh God.
They've very clearly shut down. They're lost in their grief. And they've like totally forgotten about Bill. They are completely ignoring his needs in his own grief. And he has to make the decision to basically try and get better for himself. Want to pose to you an alternative, which is Bill even alive? Bill was struck by that car, much like Jake. Bill and Zach do not believe that the stutter came from the car accident.
So I've wondered this.
Okay.
I've wondered that. And Stephen King seems to play, or not, I don't want to say play with, but he seems to really jump on this like multiple personalities and stuff like that. And I think that especially in the 80s, we you know, the thought was that a blow to the head might cause something like that. Is Bill alive? Are his friends real? Are his friends other than Mike real? Because Mike's not from inside the town, right?
In this, he is.
He is.
I think that, like, okay, we've been very open. We love the newer It movies.
Yeah.
The newer It movies have made it that Mike was part of the town, but I think he was like the homeschool kid is what they called him. And he still may be homeschooled for what it's worth. I'm not clear because he helps run the farm with his family. But Ben was the new kid and he had moved into Derry. And this, they are all just from Derry.
Well, him being from like a farm, I think mentally, or my understanding is he's more like outside of like town proper. And I think I'm getting that. Derry is similar, like where I grew up, even though it's completely different coasts, right? But where I grew up, a lot of times, if you live on a farm, even if you're within city limits, which was rare, but even if you're within city limits, you're outside of like you're not living where like Main Street, which where I grew up, it's called Walker Street, but you're not like where city is, which like is maybe more what I'm seeing. It might be why the movie kind of showed him as like that kid.
Yeah, it may be why they also, because if he's not homeschooled, it may be why they explained it that way, because his farm is right across from the Bowers farm. But obviously the It movies made Henry Bowers' dad a cop. They aged him up and made Henry Bowers' dad a cop instead of the farmer that's like next door or across the street from Mike's family. Yeah. Which I've now watched too much South Park that I'm basically just seeing fucking Randy and Tolkien's family.
Yeah.
On opposite
Integrity Weed versus I can't remember the name that they come up with for their weed farm.
Yeah. But yeah, that's incredible. That's all I'm seeing now.
My brain just keeps going like, chicken nuggets. I see orange. Like, oh my God.
For the most part, yes. I would say that I think they're all from Derry. And Mike is the outsider because he's not currently a friend with them. Because even Bill describes, like, Richie as someone he only occasionally spends time with. They only just became friends with Ben. And Stan came along with Richie when he showed up.
And I do want to be clear. It's clear, like, they interact with other people. There's a... He has prescriptions he gets. The friends are definitely there. But no, I think that there is something to that with him having this head injury, like what things are and aren't taking place. What did and didn't that affect? That's I think a pretty legitimate question, especially since he spent so long in the hospital and everything. Like, oh God, that's just...
Yeah, no, I think that's why I was thinking about it, especially because the scene that was really making me start to wonder is when he's talking about sitting on the couch with his parents and how it used to be him and George in the middle of the couch. And they'd joke around, they'd have a good time. And now it's very different because one child isn't enough. But I'm sitting here going, well, what if there is no child there? What if there's what if this isn't real? What if none of this is real?
It's almost like, what if George wasn't real? Because George dies in the gutter in the street.
Yeah.
Right? It's Bill's processing of his own death and his own haunting, I suppose, and seeing how his parents are reacting to his passing.
Yeah.
And everything that happened. Oh, that would make this book significantly better. And then what, the clown is the devil?
Maybe this is purgatory.
Yeah, I kind of like it. And maybe his friends and all the other kids and stuff are also just in purgatory. They've already died.
Yeah, no,
they're kids who've already died.
Exactly, because they have shitty situations where okay, what if Eddie didn't get the inhaler? Is that how Eddie died? Did he die of an asthma attack?
Well, obviously something happened to him when he was a kid that freaked his mom out pretty badly.
Yeah.
And now his mom is just constantly on his ass.
Ben could have died falling off of a bridge. Fell backwards over a bridge and died.
He has a single mom. Something could have happened when he was with his dad. I don't know what the story is with his dad. But also that could have something to do with the, fatness. Or it could be a gluttony thing. Because they also all kind of maybe represent sins.
Yeah.
Because Bill absolutely has some wrath issues. He's angry all the time. Ben has gluttony problems. I don't know what Bev will have.
I would guess it would be lust is how she would be used if that was the plot. I'm not saying that is what she should be representing, to be clear. But I feel like with the way Stephen King writes, he's going to go lust.
That was my initial thought too, but I'm actually wondering if it could be envy or pride or something like that, because I would almost say that Richie or Eddie or one of them might end up being lust, but she might be. That would make sense. She could be lust, and then one of them could be, envy or pride or slothfulness or, God, that could be a much more interesting take.
We have now rewritten it.
God,
wait for our fan fiction.
I'm looking for this now. I mean, maybe that's what we just weren't getting this whole time.
On to chapter 6. Chapter 6 starts out with the news clippings, which I found fascinating.
This was probably my favorite part of the section.
Yeah, it was really good. It was awesome.
I really liked this method of storytelling. Was cool.
Yeah. It was very reminiscent. Well, I guess in this case, it's not reminiscent. It is for me, but this came first of Misery when he found her scrapbook of death.
This is, obviously, epistolary. It's when you are writing in the form of letters sent back and forth. I think Dracula is written that way, but that form, it's obviously not that form, but it makes me think almost of that.
Yeah.
Where it's this intense form of show instead of tell. you're absolutely showing the story instead of telling.
Yeah.
Very cool. I really enjoyed it.
So what the news clippings tell us is that not all victims were found. Of course, I mean, they think they solved this one, but they don't know for sure. And like that, you know what? We'll get to it. Anyways, so there's another Eddie in this story. This one had gone missing, and his missing case actually prompted the discovery that his stepfather, Richard, killed his younger brother. But the stepfather did not kill Edward, who was a victim of it, as in the capital IT. It.
I felt bad for the kid, but this was one time where I was like, yeah, go it, because he framed the stepdad, which got the...
Yeah.
Well, I suppose we'll get there, but like...
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. So the news clippings like detail out first this missing kid, and then it does lead people to questioning about the younger brother, Dorsey, who died. Thing that I found interesting about Dorsey's death is that he dies on May 31st, 3 days after he was admitted. And he was admitted then on May 28th, which happens to be the same day in 1985 that Mike feels compelled to make the phone calls to everybody. Because it's happening again.
Interesting.
Thinking that's probably what the point was, because that's how...
Because it's starting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with my understanding of how it feeds, just this is all outside theory. We haven't actually gotten to this part of the books, but from the movies and from the way people talk on like Reddit and shit like that, an act of violence has to spur it to kind of like act up. And I wonder if Dorsey's like being beaten with a fucking hammer, which Richard fucking like is like, I didn't know what was gonna happen. I just wanted him to stop. What the fuck? You didn't know what was gonna happen when you took a hammer to a child?
Call him his name.
Dick.
Yeah. His name is Dickbag McGee.
And the mom, fuck her too. She was also a piece of shit because she knew. Yeah. She knew the entire goddamn time.
I understand that getting away from abuse can be really difficult. And I feel for the literature mom. I feel for any real moms out there. If you have kids involved, I don't give a shit anymore. Because the kids don't have a choice. They just don't. It's even harder for kids to get away from abuse. So, yeah. Dickbag McGee and Dickbagga McGee. Oh.
When one of your kids is now dead and the other one goes and stays someplace else regularly enough that when he goes missing, you don't even think that he's missing, you're the problem.
Yeah.
You're the problem.
Yeah.
And Eddie died on the 19th. I mean, of June, but he died on the 19th.
Interesting.
Yeah. Richard gets sent to Shawshank. I really do want to read. We have so many people going to Shawshank and getting out of Shawshank. I want to see if they are in it.
I'm excited. It's good. I think I'm also excited because we played A Way Out.
I know. I feel like we have to play A Way Out like on Twitch or something after we read it.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Just like we're going to have to do some kids on bikes for this.
We have no choice.
Yeah. These are just the things that happen.
And one of the bikes has to be silver.
So this section does end up leading us into young Mike, who the morning of Eddie's death has the urge to ride through the mist, I mean the fog, to a certain area.
This was my other favorite section, young Mike. I liked that not all of the kids have horrible lives. I really like his family.
Yeah, Mike won the fucking Stephen King lottery.
Yeah, which means his parents can't live.
They may not live into the 80s, but they get to raise him.
That's cool, because I really...
The movie killed them off for some reason, but I'm of the impression they don't die in the fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I enjoy them. I enjoy them deeply through this. His dad is great. His mom's fine. She wasn't displayed much because Stephen King has daddy issues. Obviously.
So we have to see like the daddy issues.
This feels like him writing the dad he wishes he had. I don't know that this is the dad that he is, but it's the dad he wishes he had, I think.
I saw a thing, I think it was probably on the Reddit at some point, some time ago, where people were asking, like, was Stephen King a bad father? Because obviously he presents a ton of, like, alcoholic fathers in his stories and shitty fathers. And on Creepshow, he'd had some episodes, I guess, with that. And his son, Joe Hill, had also had some episodes and also features a lot of shitty fathers.
Ooh.
And so people are like, is he a bad dad? And it's like, well, he was a drug addict and an alcoholic for a long time as being a dad. And while maybe he was doing the best he could and didn't want to be a bad dad, as a child of someone who was a drug addict.
Yeah, you aren't your best.
Yeah, you're not a good dad. I love my dad. You know, I miss him, but he was not exactly a stellar father. It just is what it is.
Yeah. Two things can be true.
Exactly.
At least that's what my therapist says all the time. Two things can be true.
It's absolutely true. It is. Two things can be true.
And in that case, two things definitely were true. I loved my dad and he was shitty at it.
Yes, exactly. So if you're a drug addict and you just want to make yourself feel better by going, oh no, but I'm a good dad, you're probably not as good as you think you are.
Yeah.
Speaking from experience, you're not as good as you think you are.
And you're not hiding it.
No, we know. Everyone knows.
I knew as young as 3 or 4. I knew as far back as I can remember. I knew. And I also, just as an interesting aside, when my parents pulled me aside and did the, like, big reveal when I was, like, I don't know, like, 9 or 10. I don't remember how old I was. They did, like, the big reveal, like, well, we've been using drugs, but we're clean now. We're working on being clean, and your dad went to rehab, and he's out now, and, like, we don't do that anymore. I, like, played along. Even though I'd known, yes. Like, but I played along for their purpose. And I remember saying that, I'm like, oh, that was the extra thing that you always put in the cart at the store. Because I was a child, and I didn't know where you bought drugs.
You were smart enough to play along, but not smart enough to know how to get drugs.
That's what I know. I knew they weren't legal, but, like, I didn't know where you buy illegal things. I thought, like...
And if it's called a drugstore, it must be called a drugstore for reasons.
I still remember that to this day. I don't think they corrected me. I don't think they really told me where. I know now that I'm an adult, I know what was happening when it was, like, I've put the pieces together now that I am in my mid-30s, but, like, I will say, like, when the big quote-unquote reveal happened, I tried to play it real smooth.
That's what's going to happen, basically. You're going to become a story of your children where they pity you because they knew and they had to play along.
Don't make your kids sound that dumb. If nothing else, don't make your kid have to ever, like, lay awake. When your kid is laying awake at night and thinking about every dumb thing they've ever said, don't make them have that story also in the repertoire. Like, that's my favorite stupid thing I've ever done.
See, we can love our parents and still not necessarily think that they made the right choices.
No, yeah, for sure.
But Mike's parents are awesome. So Mike is out biking. He ends up, as he's, like, kind of walking through this area, he finds a knife and some shit. And he recalls, like, an encounter he had with a bird back in the spring. Because his dad, like, sends him, like, to go check out locations, which I imagine is what, like, leads to him wanting to do things like write a book about dairy and shit. Because
yeah.
His father encouraged him learning.
Which I want to point out that this is good evidence that we don't just call everything abuse. Because his mom beats him up with a towel, and I'm like, you know what? Justified. There weren't cell phones at this time. She didn't know where he was.
And someone's murdering.
Derry is very dangerous.
Yes.
Fucking justified.
Yeah. Don't make your parents worry you're dead in a ditch.
Especially not if they're good parents. If they're shitty parents, like Eddie Corcoran's parents, make them worry. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want to those parents. Fucking take a hammer to dick.
Yeah.
It's self-defense.
Yep.
And you're also a kid. It's like that very inaccurate The Offspring song where it's like you're under 18, you won't be doing any time. Not accurate, but in that case, probably accurate.
So a big-ass bird comes out of a cellar hole, and the bird, by the way, once again makes the sound talk, talk, talk.
I caught that too!
And possible spoiler here, but this is not a spoiler-free podcast, so you kind of know what you're getting into. I did just look up what the fuck talk means, because I was of the impression that talk is a word, and it is because of desperation.
Yeah.
That's the missing piece here, because the entity in desperation says that a lot. It is a word in the language of the dead, which means big. And now Stephen King could just think that that's what birds sound like, is talk, 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 or tack, 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 whichever way it gets pronounced. The fact that, okay, so we have Zoltan back in the Gunslinger. I think the two-headed parrot or something had used it. I can't remember now if the parrot in
I can't remember.
Eyes of the Dragon did it. But regardless, I know Zoltan did it.
Yeah.
It is the thing that Talk says in desperation a lot. And now we have a giant bird that's doing this again. And it's a big bird. It's a big bird. Maybe she's saying, I'm big, again and again and again. I don't know the grammar of the language of the dead.
Well, what's interesting, too, about that, well, I don't know if this was where you were going with that, but when the Man in Black in The Gunslinger shows Roland the universe,
Yeah.
when he shows him 42,
Yeah.
he says, like, that's what defeats us every time, size.
Yeah.
Size is what defeats us every time. So knowing that, that's what they're saying is big.
And it is a big-ass bird.
Yeah.
Because he mentions, like, a bird that Stanley Uris wouldn't have in his book, because Stanley likes birds.
I'm not shocked.
It's a big-ass bird, and Mike arguably is one of the stronger-willed characters in this story. So, he's also one of the smarter characters, too. Either way, Mike details his narrow escape before we return to June, where Mike ends up finding some blood, sees some sketchy shit in the canal, hears something nearby, and is smart and gets the fuck out of there. And rides his bike away.
Hi-ho, silver indeed.
Yes.
Actually really enjoyed this chapter.
Yeah.
I felt like it was written well. It was edited. And Mike is just a good character. Like,
He is a really good character.
Mike's great, at least so far.
Yeah.
We'll see if he disappoints me.
So,
Especially since he just leaves. Scary shit? I'm a child. I'm going to leave here because this isn't my business. Oh, good for you, Mike.
So the last chapter of what we have read is Eddie's chapter. And again, I just fucking love Eddie. I want a book that's just Eddie. I don't care about the other characters enough. Mike is great, as we just talked about.
You can't have Eddie without Richie, though.
I don't care if Richie's there or not. I just need Eddie to be the narrator. Whatever he's doing is fine. Eddie is driving to Derry. He's the only one not using a plane because he's within driving ability, and he clearly likes cars. I don't know if he has fast cars, but I assume he does.
Can ask Tracy Chapman.
So he's driving to Derry, and he remembers the day of the successful dam building. Ben had designed something that would work better than what Eddie and Bill had been trying to do. It does work. Eventually, Richie and Stan show up to help, but Eddie is dreading the second that things are going to go silent among the group because he knows shit is about to change. Bill reveals... What?
Why? Why are things about to change?
Because of a shining.
Why does Eddie have...
I think they all have a shine, but...
Yeah, probably.
Like, I think that was my note on all of them, is they shine. But we get, like, the express moment that shit's about to happen, because Bill reveals what happened in George's room the night before, and that prompts Ben to share his story about January, and Eddie can no longer deny his own encounter with a leper at the house on Neibolt Street 6 weeks prior to this. A leper hobo who, aside from inappropriately prompting a child, introduced himself as Bob Gray.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And I do believe that's the same name he used with George in the sewer. Leper hobo comes after Eddie, and Eddie also manages to escape, though he escaped the first time, went back, climbed under the patio, and got a lot closer, and then ran away again and managed to get away.
I think this was why I wondered if Eddie is actually lost, because it's because of the prompting. Although we can talk about all the murder and everything else, but this feels really squicky.
I think because it's a child. It's an 11-year-old kid.
It really doesn't feel good.
It's not, like, it's very uncomfortable.
It is real. I think that's, like, if Stephen King wasn't going to get you with the scary shit, he'll get you with some of the more uncomfortable shit.
Yeah. I adore Eddie. I did not like this. This is really uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's not.
He's a kid.
Yeah, it's... We could have... we could have done something else.
I will say that, like, just the way that Eddie's demeanor, like, is written was very reminiscent to me of what we saw of Cuthbert in The Gunslinger. And I know that you've said before that Stephen King has a soft spot for the sidekick, which we're finding out now, as people who did, like, the newer It movies, that they kind of swapped Eddie and Richie in the movies. And Eddie's more the sidekick to Bill. So
far, Eddie is probably more Jamie or Elaine still. Mm-hmm. Cuthbert is very funny. Mm-hmm. Cuthbert is the way that Richie constantly talks and constantly has something funny to say. He's still more like Cuthbert in demeanor. Elaine also is very much a sidekick for Roland. They're just not as close. Like, Roland and Cuthbert are like almost like brothers, I suppose. And yeah, so far we don't have as much of that with Richie. Like, the movie has it that they're already all best of buddies, and I think that's because we have Finn Wolfhard of Stranger Things in that role. But
the kid from Shazam wasn't enough.
No, Eddie, he's not, like, he doesn't quip enough. He's not.
I just meant the demeanor and the way that he looks up to Bill. Yeah. Less the personality, like, less that part. Because at one point he even describes Bill as a good man and says that he looks up to him like a big brother or a father. Because Eddie's father died like 4 years prior to this. And the way that Cuthbert is written in the first Gunslinger, when we have the flashbacks, particularly with the cook. Not the fight one, the cook one.
Yeah.
He seems to have that same kind of reverence for Roland of big brother or father, which is kind of weird for a child.
It's possible that Stephen King hadn't ironed out who was going to be how or what then. Because I can see what you mean. Cuthbert just gets so, like, those two characters get so delineated and ironed out, and Cuthbert is so, like, specific with how he is, and the fact that he's constantly running at the mouth.
Well, and I'm mostly just
so important.
Talking with what we've read to this point, because that's why I'm saying it made me think of this specific instance from the Gunslinger. I am not saying they are comparable.
Yeah.
It just was reminiscent for me of that.
No, for sure.
Unless, like, I'm not saying that they are the same thing, because I don't necessarily think that Bill is Roland.
Yeah.
Other than being a main character, which we've got to do a...
And I'm just taking what you're saying, and I think he is. Like, that's why I think Silver is kind of his version of the guns. Mm-hmm. Ben having a gun is interesting. I'm interested to see how it comes up later.
Yeah, I know he mentioned it's basically like a BB gun, but
Yeah.
it's a gun.
I'm just interested to see how he uses it later.
Yeah.
But the way that Bill relies on silver and just the way that it's used, the way that he's almost symbiotic with this tool is similar to the way that the gunslingers kind of are and get. I'm interested to see if the other kids kind of get that way with tools that they have.
Yeah.
Eddie almost seems that way with his inhaler, so to speak. The way that I mentioned, like the Arthurian thing where they have the round table, that's kind of the feel like the quartet.
Yeah.
This is definitely Bill's quartet around him. That is Roland's original quartet, is, Cuthbert and Elaine and Jamie. And then later he gets Eddie and Susanna and Jake and Oy as his new one. And so it's an interesting thing for you to bring up that like, hey, I see this kind of comparison. I think that Cuthbert, I think you're right. I think that it had not been delineated out. And I think that later Stephen King decides, like, it's interesting that Elaine is the one with the touch and Cuthbert is constantly running at the mouth. He decides that he likes one of them more than he likes the other in a weird way. Considering how he had used one of them before compared to the other.
Yeah.
And who he had decided was closer to Roland compared to the other. He has to adjust things depending on how he kind of decides he wants things as he moves. I'm glad that you pointed that out because I don't think you're wrong. I think he just decided that Cuthbert was maybe not. I think that had he written that 20 years later, that character would have been Elaine.
On the subject of Eddie's father figuring of Bill. I'm going to go back to my references to adult animation and say that this made me kind of think of the Torpedo episode of Bob's Burgers, where at the end, Torpedo's just like, Bob, this is why you need to pick, older people to be your hero and not someone your age, because by the time they're old enough to disappoint you, they're dead. One other thing that happened in this chapter is, so Eddie likes to go by Nybalt Street because he likes to go around the train tracks. And this was something I thought that you would enjoy. And I imagine you did enjoy it if you caught it. I'm assuming you did. You were audiobooking, but I don't know, what things stand out and what things don't. But the lobsters.
I did catch the lobsters. I did.
Train guy threw some lobsters to Eddie.
And I thought his mom and friend were going to get poison, like food poisoning, from random train lobsters. Especially when he talked about his mom farting. I'm like, oh, that's the beginning. He was right to avoid the lobster. And then, they didn't. It was awful. They even ate a bunch of mayonnaise with them, and they were fine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they just ate random fucking lobster. But I guess because they were alive, they're fresh, so why would they get food poisoning? But I don't know enough about seafood. I barely just started eating shrimps. So
no, it's true. And the thing is like you mentioned, Eddie didn't want to eat them. And he mentions he says it wasn't like that he wouldn't. It's that he felt he couldn't because he remembers them just slithering and clicking in the box because they were alive. And he didn't know what the fuck they were at first. And when he shows the box to his mom, at first she's like, what the fuck are you bringing me in a box? He's like, oh shit, lobster dinner.
And then she just makes lobster salad. They're fresh lobster. Why would she go straight to lobster salad?
I imagine it was because she got 4 of them, and it sounds like the first, she made them a nice lobster dinner, and then when he wouldn't eat it, she had to do something.
Oh.
So I do think initially she had probably made them into just lobsters you could eat, but when her and her friend were having a nice luncheon, yeah. But regardless, obviously, we've talked a little bit of I didn't finish the drawing of the 3, but I remember the beginning.
Yeah, with the
crabs, I think. Are they crabs?
They're kind of like crab monsters.
Okay.
I'm interested to read the descriptions of them because I haven't in 20 years. But they're not just crabs, but they're scary.
Yeah, but they're crustaceans, basically. Yeah. They're essentially possibly lobsters. And while I haven't gotten to this book, we've also talked about the trains. Yeah. And the train tracks that were even just in the Gunslinger.
Yeah.
And this train line never comes through again. They go out of business. Did fucking a Manny find a hole in the world and the fucking train goes through it with lobsters?
Are you trying to say that the lobsters came from Blaine the Train?
I'm not even talking about like Blaine the Train, but just because we know there are train tracks under the mountain in the Gunslinger. So there were trains ever. Blaine does not have to be the only train. Blaine could be the train. I don't know. I don't know what Blaine's up to.
I won't lie. I love the idea. And when we get to Blaine the Train, you will see why I love the idea of Roland and his quartet on Blaine the Train doing the things that are happening there. And while they're passing through the wastelands and all the things they do, at one point they also pass into this dimension and somebody just kicks a box of lobster out at a kid. And then they pass back into their dimension.
Yes.
Like, that's incredible.
Yes. Yes, that's what I'm here for. Especially, like, if it were the weird crab monsters. Like, in our world, they're just lobsters. I don't know. I don't know what these lobsters up to.
Lobsters that are defeated by Eddie's mom.
And one pot.
And one pot. Permanently disfigure Roland. Defeated by Eddie's mom.
Sonia Kasprek is a force to be reckoned with.
Clearly. I kind of love her, I'm not gonna lie.
I do too. And like Eddie's like adult Eddie in the 80s, he is driving through Boston, which is where Paul's mother and a Mrs. Kasprek went. The other thing that I thought was kind of interesting in Eddie's chapter is that he mentions that like when he starts that his memories might be poisoned, which is such a unique way of like putting that.
Yeah.
Because he knows like something's not right because they're all struggling to try and reach back for those memories.
Yeah.
But the fact that even he's taking it is just like, no, this may not even be accurate because my memories could be poisoned. They may not be real.
It's a very Eddie way to put it, considering he worries so much about things like illness and poison. To think about his memories being ill or being poisoned. That's really interesting. I like that.
Yeah. The last thing that I found particularly interesting in his chapter was he was talking about Richie's nicknames for all of them. And how it was like a secret identity that separated them from their parents' bullshit. You know?
Yeah.
He doesn't have to be Sonia Kasprek's fear of staph infection when he's Ed's, even if he doesn't like it.
Yeah, I have to say, as the person that I am, that definitely rang pretty hard for me.
I think a lot of these chapters do, because like needing more editing or not, there are just like these things just like, God, no, that is such being a child. That is just part of being a child. Yeah. And apparently it was the same in the 50s as it is now.
That is, I think, part of what is really interesting to me about like things like anthropology and history is the further back you look and the more that you find, the more that humanity, like our experiences are kind of, they've always been this. We've always just been people. And yeah, you're right. Like, it was the same in the 50s as it is now. That's why I'm saying, like, why? Why are you making a dam? Because kids do stupid shit. They just do stupid shit. In the chapter where they are getting their report cards, I think that's Ben's chapter. Like, and it's the end of school. Like, my school, obviously we didn't do it that way. A lot of schools, by that point, they're mailing out report cards, but just that idea, like the fact that you can remember the last day of school so many years later. I know I can. And just that idea of like, you're very orderly and you're waiting and then you're booking it out the door. And we haven't got there, but like, you're so excited for summer and then you end up so excited for school to start because kids have been the same forever and ever. People are just the same. Always and everywhere. Kind of heartwarming.
It is. And I do think that that's one of the strong things about this book is it makes it easier to like put yourself in it.
Yeah.
Of just like, no, I remember that feeling. I remember sitting there and waiting for like the last day of school to end. And there's like this like, I'm vaguely feeling sick at my stomach because like just really, it's a weird day. It's a weird day. Doing stupid shit like trying to fucking uncover a manhole. in a playground.
Yeah.
Like that was ever gonna work.
No, and in reality, you kind of know that it's not, but you just need something to do.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's part of their surprise when the dam holds.
Yeah.
Because in reality, they know it's kind of not going to work, but you just want to see how far you can get.
Yeah.
You want to see what you can do, and you just need something to do.
Which is why they're playing down there in the first place.
Yeah.
A place that's super dangerous.
Right.
Because all I could think of is when I was like in 5th grade, maybe 4th or 5th grade, and going through what we called the creek. It was the fucking sewer system, basically. Like it did eventually feed off into what was not cemented on the sides, but it was like a drainage space. It was super dangerous. There's a reason we weren't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
We did it anyway.
For the longest time when I was growing up, when I was about the age of these kids, we lived in like a cul-de-sac, but the end of the cul-de-sac was just like an abandoned field, not abandoned, but like an empty field next to a freeway. And there was like a chain link fence. And if you are familiar with California, it was I-5 on the other side of that chain link fence. And this is the 90s. I don't know what the speed limit is now. At the time, it was 70 miles an hour on that corridor of I-5. And it's this field that is just full of like yellow, thorny kind of grass, kind of like brambles and trash. And it was like most parents would be like, you can't play over there. It was the only place we wanted to play.
Of course.
And then if we walked around through this area, behind all the houses, like behind the fencing for all the houses, there was like an irrigation ditch, like an irrigation canal. You know, the ones that are like cement, angled on both sides. And then on the other side of that canal was somebody's like orchard. I think it was like an olive orchard. But it was very adventurous for us. And there were like bushes of like, oh gosh, some kind of little blue flowers and lots more trash. And I'll tell you right now, when we had dogs and everybody else who had dogs, you would just pick up your dog poop with a shovel and toss it over your fence. But as kids, again, the biggest adventure was going into that field and then walking around behind the houses back there because there was very little supervision and it was cool. And the rules were always, don't go down in the canal, in the ditch, because you don't know when the farmers are going to open the canal. Like, you don't know what their schedules are. You don't know when suddenly there's going to be a bunch of fucking nasty, dirty, rushing irrigation water, which can suck you into tiny holes and you will drown. And also, you can just get hurt. You can have trouble getting out. And you're way back there. And, like, also, don't go back there. Be careful of bottles and syringes and shit. Like, it was just bad. Like, we were not supposed to be back there at all. And it was the only place we ever wanted to be. It was just a wooden fence between me and my house. I could look through the slats and there was my backyard. But it was where I wanted to be because I wasn't supposed to be there. And it always felt like an adventure.
Yes.
It was awful. You get stung by stuff. You get all scratched up and whatever. It was the worst.
They weren't worth it, but they were totally worth the stories.
It was the best. It always felt like it was
childhood.
Oh, and the other rule was don't go into the orchard that's like right on the other side because like it's trespassing. Don't go over there.
Yeah.
But
and you know, this book is real good about like taking those spaces and then plopping a fucking clown there that wants to fucking hurt you.
Right. Oh my God. I'd have shit bricks if a clown had just shown up.
Oh yeah. No,
I'm there.
I'm still terribly chlorophobic. I don't like clowns. And
even if it was a nice clown.
Yeah, no.
I'm like, who are you?
Yeah, no clowns. I've been at fucking like carnival, like as a kid. I haven't been to a carnival as an adult in a really long time. but I'd been at carnivals and
we need
shit.
to go to one. That'd
And
be so much fun.
there'd be clowns there just handing out like balloons and shit. I'd start crying because I don't like clowns. It's shocking that I'm able to like tolerate this. I
Yeah,
think
I'm
because
proud of
it's
you.
made so othered. But if I'd seen a fucking clown down in the creek, I wouldn't be going back there.
Yeah.
Like that's
fair.
That's stranger danger.
I don't have like a phobia of them. I just don't get what's amusing or fun or funny about them. I don't like them, but not like on a phobia level, just on like a, okay, you do you, clowns. Like I just neither, I do not care about, I do not care for or about clowns. So it's a different.
You remember a few years ago when people were dressing up like clowns?
I do.
It's just like standing places with knives.
Yeah, for some reason this year people keeps getting mentioned.
It was a weird
people
time.
Just suddenly are remembering like, why was that just allowed to happen?
What the fuck was that? Because I remember the one being in the park across from the apartment.
Yeah.
It's like, God, this is why? Why is this? Why?
You know, honestly, like, why not, I guess? Like, once one person did it, it's like, well, I guess everybody has to do it now. But, like, I don't know.
It's too easy for, like, someone dressed up that way to actually, like, do harm. Because you can't tell what somebody looks like in clown makeup. You can't. A clown assaulted me. They don't look like themselves. You can't distinguish their features.
So, I believe that there's actually rules about that. And
Okay.
that there's that's why there's clown schools. You're supposed to that is another thing that's upcoming before we finish this book. I have researches that are coming because, as I'm sure everybody who's ever even heard of it has figured out, maybe this was a little bit influenced by a little someone named John Wayne Gacy. I'm starting to wonder if it's also a little bit influenced by it might be Henry Lee Lucas, the like train guys. So it might not be Henry Lee Lucas I'm thinking of, but basically someone who like was a
drifter.
Yes, like a drifter but literally was on a train, I think. But I have to do more research into it. I want to see who was active in the 50s, because this is not, but there's absolutely no chance, and I've done a little bit of precursory looking, there's no chance that this isn't a little bit influenced by John Wayne Gacy.
Well, you know what? Here, we'll have a little practice for whatever the to-be-titled murder hour is to be.
Right?
Per the name, and I've seen, like, I think the cover of a movie that they made for him of somebody in really shitty clown costuming. But all I really know, going into whatever it is you're going to find out, is I'm pretty sure that he did a clown, and he abducted little boys and murdered them. I'm guessing that's wrong.
It's so almost right. And I think that's a lot of what the book is playing on.
But this is why Murder Hour is planned the way that it's planned.
Yeah, upcoming someday when I ever do anything is a podcast where Kat tells me what she thinks happened and I tell her what actually happened.
The roles will be reversed.
And basically how the media views and reports on some of this shit.
We'll get to it.
I'll tell you how that is almost right when we get there and when I can. So
problem. Well, that is it. The first half of part 2. We are basically gonna finish part 2 and read Interlude 2 for the next episode. I assume that means we're going to get the rest of the Losers Club like interactions with whatever the fuck happened to them in The Clown. I believe the next interlude is more Mike, so yay.
Well, that'll be nice. I liked the last interlude, so
I did too.
I'm here for yet more Mike. The last time that we pulled a card, because it's card time, the last time we pulled one was the Page of Wands, which embodies passionate, raw potential. And didn't that just ooze through this episode? Let's see what the cards hold for our reading journey as we continue. The Seven of Pentacles? I think that's...
Yeah, that's
okay.
The 7.
So the Seven of Pentacles is a gentleman holding a hoe, wearing a jerkin over a long sleeve shirt. There is a bush with 7 pentacles upon it that he's looking at tiredly. But that could just be me projecting onto him. But he doesn't look happy.
No, you know what? But tarot generally presents imagery that does speak to what the card represents. And the 7 is representative of planting seeds for the future and encouraging, like, looking at long-term investments and considering how much book we still have left. That sounds about right.
They do look like ivy or like pumpkin leaves, like squash leaves on the card. So I heard maybe there were some other worlds, so I guess you could go on and find some of them now.
Goodbye, our many constant lobsters.
I love you.
You can follow us on Instagram at Many Constant Worlds. You can DM us if you have any thoughts, questions, things you'd like to put out there. You can also email us at manyconstantworlds@gmail.com.